And we're back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and about Star Trek: The Next Generation. And today's episode is Data's Day, and I'm joined once again by Sean from Trek on the Tube. Hello, Sean.
Hello world. Hello Sohail. Hello everyone. How you doing?
It's a bubble universe, my channel, so it's about 12 people that you're saying.
Well, a bubble
But
universe is a
I
universe
love those
nonetheless.
12 people. It's true. I love those 12 people so much. But so I guess our previous episode, which was now recorded 3 weeks ago, but this episode is being recorded directly after New Year's episode of the new year,
It is.
2018.
It is.
And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, Starfleet Boy has already been through one New Year's celebration because I started in 2016.
Oh wow.
So it's traditional to have a little quick New Year's New Year's
There's so
discussion.
much
How
Star
was your
Trek, isn't
How was your New Year, Sean?
It was good. We had well I work very long hours, which means I usually don't, have the opportunity to actually celebrate New Year's. And this was, I think, my first New Year's off in 5 years maybe.
Oh,
But of course I
that's
was
actually a
absolutely
delightful.
tired. Yeah, no, but I was, it was, I don't know, completely knackered. So I couldn't go out or anything. So we wanted to go to like Montreal and see the fireworks, but then we were discouraged by how many people were going to be there. Uh, B by, I suppose, me being tired. So we stayed at home and we watched a movie.
It's
And we had a
uh
nice meal.
I did that ball drop thing one year. Do it from anywhere near. A friend of mine lives very close enough to Times Square,
Mm.
and you can
Oh,
see like the festivities. So I was in the comfort of his home, but it wasn't. It's not the same as the people on the ground on the ground
yeah.
that are there. But I think that's the only time I ever did New Year's because large crowds kind of make me uncomfortable. I need like a couch, a beverage, and a little bit of space to dance. So
I I much prefer. I mean, if I were to do New Year's with people, it would more, because this was just with my wife. But if it were with multiple people, I think it would be, around a dinner table or something, and just chatting and eating, or just, in the living room, and
that
not necessarily in a public place partying, whatever. I'm not.
I think that's like the majority of people's experience on New Year's because and I guess social media makes you more aware of this than ever. But when I was going through on Instagram, you can see little video snippets should your friends or choose to upload them. And so the majority of that, it was the scene you just described. It was like wonderful little small parties at home, or just like gathered on the couch and thinking about New Year's stuff.
It just goes to show there's kind of a disconnect between what you grow up imagining what New Year's is and what it actually is. Because you imagine big parties and people, getting wasted and fireworks and screaming and yelling in the streets and stuff, and maybe it's the movie's fault, but
Of course, it's the
that's
movie's fault. Everything's
it's
the
not
movie's fault.
everything is
Everything is the
violence
fault
and
of
everything, and video games.
Haven't you learned that by now?
My God, I'm so behind.
Well, now you've just learned a valuable lesson. Now, on to the episode. So, Data's Day. Data's Day is one of the most delightful episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I remember loving it.
Unique.
Unique. It's a really awesome concept. So, uh, maybe for this one you want to give the episode summary since you like it so much. Are you game?
No, no.
Alright,
Okay, I'll
fine.
tell you what.
Uh,
This is 2018, so I will prepare myself mentally and psychologically to do an episode recap at some point,
awesome. That's awesome. All right,
but
cool. Well,
not today.
so in the meantime, you'll have to help me out because I decided for 2018 that I'm not going to write them down anymore. I'm going to do them straight off
Oh
the
my
top of my
God,
head again. So you'll have to assist my mind. But
I'm mad.
I've seen this episode enough times to pretty much sum it up by saying that in this episode we learn that Data communicates still with Dr. Maddox, the guy who tried to take him apart from the previous episode where his humanity or his actual sentience or personage was in question. And he writes to him about mundane things like his programs and his processes, and he's like they're exchanging back and forth, while Star Trek is going on, and you see everything. Real Data is constantly in a pen pal relationship with Dr.
In touch
Maddox, and
with this.
it's kind of so we get to see a description from Data's perspective of a day in his life, and he happens to choose Keiko and Miles O'Brien are getting married, and also in another story, a crewman called Juarez is having a baby, and so that's about all the. Oh, and an ambassador is coming aboard the Enterprise. That's like kind of so. Through that, we sense of those three plot lines. Learn more about Data. We get to watch him pick out gifts for Keiko and Miles, and we get to watch him learn how to dance, and all. There's a quandary because Keiko doesn't want to get married, and finally the big the ambassador who is going to be part of a mission of opening communications is actually a Romulan spy that's been deep seated into Vulcan and Federation society for like 20, 30 years, like actually her whole
Charming woman.
career, whatever that would be. So wow, Romulans. But
Good game.
good job, Romulan. Good game. I commend you for your game here, but I still
Oh my.
anyway. Oh my. Yeah, it's pretty outrageous what happens. And so yeah, that's a day in Data's life. Keiko ends up deciding to get married anyways. We learned that there's a night shift and a day shift on the Enterprise, which we should have guessed, no surprise. And the show ends. That's it. Bob's your uncle.
That's pretty straightforward.
So yeah, it is an awesome episode on many levels, but I think I forgot to mention in the summary, like the neat thing about it is that Data's his humanity, which I have a lot of thoughts about. I would be curious to see what you think about that. But he ends up at least it shows us, the audience, that perhaps he already has that humanity, because there's a lot of instances and small moments throughout the episode that indicate that Data is actually not, if not an emotion, he's feeling something.
There's a lot of kind of direct lines where he'll say something like, "I can't feel nervous, but I am anticipating this or that," and so yeah, that kind of
right. And that particular scene's kind of fun because he's saying the lines of like, if I had emotions, I would feel nervous right now, because it's about the ambassador's kind of suspicious throughout the whole episode. She's very like top secret mission. I didn't mention that in summary either, but like she's, Data's kind of like curious would be the correct,
because they're going to the neutral zone, and that's kind of why would you change your course straight away? But
it's like builds a lot of tension. But he goes, if I had emotions, I would be nervous, but his fingers tapping involuntarily, and he kind of takes notice of it in that scene, which is kind of awesome.
That's what I wanted to say. I wanted to say there's a lot of moments where you realize he's human, or he's got some sort of humanity in him, not necessarily when he speaks, but more in what he does. It's kind of a read between the line situations. That you
Right.
have all of these moments which are like just that the moment he's looking at T'Pel, the ambassador in the turbo lift, he's
Oh
keeping
yeah.
his head as straight as possible, but looking on the side, trying to trying to understand what's going on in this Vulcan's mind. It's great. And then as you said, he's tapping his finger and he kind of glimpses at his finger. There's another one as well. There's a third one where I noticed he does something with his eyes,
Oh, was it? Well, there
which
was the
is very
dance.
human.
There's the dance scene where he kind of holds this like really freaky smile and stare.
That's
He's
more a
like,
testament to how robot he is or how android he is,
yeah,
to be a
yeah.
politically
I think.
correct
Well,
there.
I think this
But
episode. I think this episode actually explains Data a lot too, because what you just said, like, I think it's easy to forget he's an android because he looks
mm,
human, he acts very human, like his, like his mannerisms. He's very good at what
yeah.
he does. His programming is pretty excellent, like
But I
to
mean,
to
they
come
show that
that far.
the moment begin the episode where he completely misinterprets the good news by Keiko,
Yes.
and goes out and announces that at O'Brien, like, "Hey, I got good news. You want to make her happy? Don't get married." It's like, no, you didn't get that one quite.
The sad thing is that I'm sure there are many situations where like a best man who has to deliver that news actually ends up delivering it like and to try and offset the uncomfortableness
Oh my God.
oh my gosh, but it's so good. All that stuff's really good. I liked this is kind of finally where you begin to see DS9 being planted because O'Brien and Keiko are a big part of DS9. So
Mm,
I don't think they
yeah.
did it intentionally. I think they just thought that this is an interesting
Well,
uh,
this is one of those
characters
opportunities to
to
really
bring.
go. They have a lot of B plots throughout TNG that involve Keiko and O'Brien because I suppose you get used to those characters, you like them, and when you want to do something that isn't too important that you don't want to involve, the main cast, you can kind of use them, and it's a good idea. It works well.
To me, I think Chief O'Brien really expanded the storytelling to like show you what life is like on a ship like that. Like it's kind of
Hmm.
cool because do that through any one of the Magnificent Seven that we always get, but it's nice to see it from other
Oh yeah.
things, which I'm looking forward to another episode coming up soon called The Lower Decks, which is another episode that like I
Oh
think
yeah.
like Data's Day is very like unique and it defines. I think that we get a little Humbert the doctor likes to talk about how the Romulans never really went anywhere, and I'm curious what you think other camp where I think that they do exactly what I think Romulans need to do. But he thinks that like the whole time throughout Next Generation we keep getting teased about the Romulans, but we never get like an actual resolution. And I think for him that would have been like a battle, like an actual like space battle involving a fleet
Ah,
or something like that. I have to ask him, but that's the impression that I get.
because at
Whereas
the
for
end
me,
of,
I think that
sorry, go ahead. I was going to say at the end of Nemesis, you kind of get this almost peaceful resolution in the sense that you finally see that some of these Romulans are coming around to the Federation side and want to become allies. So I can see that throughout the whole like TNG, DS9, Voyager, and the films, nothing really happens with them ever. The big baddie of the Romulan Empire is is the Riemann kind of coup d'état.
it's true. It's true. Nero, and he even says, "I stand apart from." He kind of establishes himself, like cleans his hands
Mm.
of Roman
Did you
government.
see
So
Nero?
yeah, but I like that. I like that. I think that that's how that's kind of a in and of itself. I think that's kind of great and brave storytelling because you're not always going to battle with your enemies. Sometimes it could be a Cold War and depicting what life is like under a Cold War. I mean, like certainly under the climate that we have today, I'm hoping the world remains sans World War III. Even though Star Trek predicts a World War III in our future,
Oh, it's
in our
past
past.
already though. It's like in
Right,
1990, isn't it?
right. But I'm saying, in our point in history, if you were to rack up what hasn't happened, we've avoided the eugenics war, so that hasn't happened. So that's good. Humans are doing really
I
good.
mean, let's be real. We're going to avoid first contact as well, but I mean, whatever.
I don't know that like that there was a asteroid, cigar shaped asteroid that was passing very close to our planet that
Hmm.
a lot of folks were excited for a moment, and I thought Donald Trump was going to release the
The hounds.
Roswell. Release the hounds. Oh, I forgot. They're puppies.
To reflect on what you were saying about the Romulans, I know, like the biggest comparison is TOS Klingons represent kind of the Russians in the Cold War. Um, but in a funny way, I think the Romulans kind of represent the Russians in the Cold War, even more because I mean, there's never really been open war with the Russians the same way there's never been open war with the Romulans. They're just kind of this big, dark, scary kind of territory in the background that's constantly used as an example for like these guys are the enemies. Like, don't mess with them. We don't want anything to happen with them. Nothing ever happens because everyone stays on their side of the territory and everyone has laws that not everyone understands on both sides. But then
I
they're
right.
just like a presence.
I like the way Data explains it in that one scene. He says that the Romulans have a policy of testing our kind of confrontational policy. Like they'll come within, striking distance of our star bases that are along the neutral zone or things like that, just to see what
Mm,
the Federation's willing to do. And the Federation's policy is always don't strike first. So it's like,
always.
it's an interest. What's that?
Oh, always.
Oh yeah, no.
The
So
policy
yeah,
is
I mean, like
not to strike first. It's
that's what's brilliant about Discovery's pilot episode. I think that the fact that like discussion takes place between Burnham and uh Captain Giorgio is valuable for brand new Star Trek fans to get kind of like some of the philosophy behind Star Trek that you don't necessarily pick up if you're just coming in on Discovery. It's like Star Trek in a whole new way from any other generation of people that experience Star Trek. It's got to be like
D-
mind blowing or confusing or whatever. It's like
Discovery though has blurred the lines between responding to a first strike by an enemy and revenge.
well,
Which
we'll talk about Captain Maxwell in the next.
we
That's
will.
like
We will.
exactly the theme of the next episode. Really quickly though, there was an Earth Romulan war on Memory Alpha. I thought I knew about this, but let's see. It's probably something from the books. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, it's like more. Is it? Let's see. In 2156, Earth forces in the Romulan Empire entered a state of war that would continue to 2160. So in a Mirror Darkly Part 2, the Balance of Terror. Oh yeah, so it was mentioned in the original series briefly, but it's a very short conflict. Kind of like the Klingon
Like
War.
there has been with the
Kind of
Klingons.
like the Discovery Klingon War that lasts only what, 6 months? 8 months
It
maybe. It's
must
a
be a very
a
big
year long
investment to
war.
create. It must be a very big investment. It must cost a lot of resources to build a starship, let alone a fleet. And
Oh yeah.
so, I mean, war isn't necessarily cost effective, is it? Sending
And then
ships out to blow each other up, even for empires and federations, which are huge. I mean, you probably don't want to do that.
well, and it's implied that there's no money in, at least when they say no money, they mean no currency. So
No,
everything
but there is
works
resources. You need the metals. You need the alloys.
right, but somehow resources are exchanged without money. Like that's within the Federation.
Within the Federation
Within the Federation,
of
somehow that
Klingons,
so it's
Romulans.
fascinating to think about. Like I wonder how many government classes have actually torn apart the economy of a no currency like Star Trek.
But here's the
I'm
thing.
now in the this is me in the witness protection program audience.
Here's the thing. Within the
this,
Federation,
this Star Trek
they,
fandom protection program. No, I'm just kidding.
oh my God. Within the Federation, they still have Federation credits, which they can use on planets which aren't part of the Federation.
Correct, yes.
So there still
But
has
it
to be
seems
some
like
sort of currency.
you can also just replicate money. Like if I were gonna go to like a planet that still
But
still
that's the whole
uses money,
point. I
I
mean,
would
that's
just
the whole
replicate
point.
it.
When it comes to like, what are they called? Fucking Quark and all of the Fenry, what they use. Um, how can I forget the names?
Back here. Oh,
Hello,
there you are.
I'm back.
You're back. So you were saying the whole point of Quark's something, and then we lost you.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say the currency that Quark uses and that all the Ferengi use, which is and I completely forget the
Gold pressed
gold
latinum.
pressed latinum. From what I understand, and this is just maybe I'm completely off, but from what I gather, latinum is not a replicatable or replicable. I don't know how you
Yes,
want to say that, but
replicatable. I think that's absolutely correct.
and so considering you can't actually replicate that substance or that alloy or whatever it is because it's liquid or kind of it's not necessarily
It
solid
just
from
has whatever, yeah, whatever its properties are. You can't make because you can definitely
you
replicate gold.
you can't yeah but that's just it's just the wrapping it's useless
Yeah,
the gold is worthless when put around the latinum but the latinum you can't actually replicate it. And so I think what they tried to explain is there are certain things in the Star Trek universe that you cannot replicate.
and that are extremely valuable.
I
That
would
are
assume
yeah,
the orbs from DS9
yeah.
that have to do with the prophets and those kind of things you can't replicate that.
Oh yeah, they're priceless. Exactly. But in other words, I mean, that's all like, yeah, exactly. Like, you're right. There is trading going on of some kind, and certainly like there are money still out there, which I like that the next generation at least acknowledges that. Like,
Hmm.
it's
It
true.
only
I think
makes
Rom.
sense, though, doesn't it?
What did you think of when the Romulan reveal happened? Like were you like did you predict, like when you first saw it, did you predict it? Do you remember being excited by it?
Um, I mean, I don't really remember the first time it is day. I was, a child, so I couldn't remember what I was thinking about it. It makes when you rewatch it, it makes complete sense she's a Romulan because they have a way of showing Vulcans on screen, which is not at all the way they show this Vulcan. They have this kind of impending doom ambiance around her all the time. And so you know something's off. You think, okay, even if she is a Vulcan, she's working for the Romulans or something. There's something
Some,
wrong about
there's something going on. There's
yeah,
yeah, because
it's just the way they made the episode. It's too obvious.
it
Maybe it wasn't back in the day, but maybe today it is. I couldn't tell
I
if
mean,
that's
no,
the problem, but
I definitely remember being suspicious of that character, but like what I was suspicious of her was not that she was a an
the
implanted
Romulan spy.
spy for that
Mm.
long. Yeah, that was kind of a thing that was cool. Like I was just, to me that was like one of those moments in Star Trek where I was like, the Romulans are pretty pretty crazy. Like,
Devious.
devious. And I really liked, we don't ever see him again, but I liked Admiral I can't remember his name now. I was gonna say Jarek, but it's not. It's like
Oh, what's his face?
let's like take a look at it. Let's head over to IMDb.
Okay, well, while you do that, I'm gonna talk about something that you mentioned earlier on. Um, you're talking about how Data has kept in contact with that I don't know. Is he like a?
Maddox, commander. He's a commander, Commander Maddox.
But is he a scientist or an engineer or
Yeah,
a bit of
he's a
both?
he. I think if I'm not mistaken, because my memory is really bad, but we could easily look this up. He was the director or the lead scientist working on a cybernetics program to
Scientist, yeah.
basically create an android like Data at the Daystrom
High,
Institute or someplace like
high
that.
ranking, so kind of
Yeah,
scientific or engineer or however you want to call it.
correct. Yeah.
I found it interesting that he had kept in contact with him. I don't. What do you think they have some sort of relationship, as in a friendship going on, or do you think it's purely kind of educational? Like he's telling him how he feels and what's going on in his day, just so that the other guy gets a grasp of how it is to be Data.
Based on the, it's hard to tell because based on the delivery, like I like that's when the cool thing about this episode is the whole time we're hearing the contents of the letter while Data narrates
Mm,
is narrating. He's like, the whole time that's one of the things about this episode is that like you get a narration but without
without
it's
the
tricky.
dialogue.
Yeah, it's cool. And it was a friendly sounding tone to me, but I can also imagine that because of the ending of that previous episode, um, which now my memory, I can't remember the name. Data, my aromatic syndrome is advancing too much.
Yes,
Get Dr. Crusher out
is this
here.
documentation just a pure form of documentation, or is it really like a friend chatting
I
to a
think he's
friend?
I think he's always Data's always gonna have a friendly tone, but I do think that like I am in
That's
my
just his
this
polite tone, isn't it?
right, but I imagine that he and Commander Maddox do eventually become friends if we were to follow through
Mm.
to like whatever end of that storyline of Data's storyline, which is actually quite
My
cool. He's
God.
like the
Cut
bicentennial
to
man.
a scene of Maddox hearing about Data's death and
Or not even. Oh yeah, that's I'm
just
sure. Yeah,
falling to the ground, screaming, "No!"
fucking Starfleet, you wasted this valuable resource. It was one of a kind. You sent
Years
that.
ago, I told you to leave him in my office. I blame you, Picard.
That's totally what happens. You know it.
He
You
could
know
have
it.
just spaced himself.
And and consequently, you could also have a scene where maybe from my understanding in the comic books, BB-8 somehow becomes
BB-8
Data again. Yeah,
before.
BB.
My God. BB-8 becomes Data? What is this podcast? What am I listening to?
Thank you for thank you for like. Well, before it came before BB-8, so there you before. So my understanding of the comic books is that B4 somehow becomes Data. He like I'm not sure what the
Yeah, I refuse
I
that.
didn't
That's
read
not
that
canon.
comic. But you could have a scene if you did a movie where if you did want to do that, you could have Maddox be the one who's like, well, didn't Data connect to B4? We
Hmm.
can make his subroutine dominant and suppress
I'll tell
B4's
you. I'll tell
subroutine.
you.
Like at least he's that good at
I'll tell
at
you what, though.
cybernetics.
We're going a little off track here, but
Yes. As we
small side,
it's the Star Trek
as we do.
universe. There's so much. There's so much.
Small side note. I believe that it's not a good idea to have Data replace B4, be it like a dominant subroutine or anything like that, because that goes against everything Data stands for. Data would want B4 to live his own life and live his own experiences, even if B4 is limited in comparison to Data and Law. So I
So
think that Data
the
is
Data
dead and he
subroutine.
should not come back, and that's it.
Here's the genius of Dr. Soon. I have a story that I just made up to explain
Ooh, ooh.
why it's okay.
He lives in the cloud.
Dr. Soon created B4 presumably before Lore and Data, right? That's why he's so
Yep.
simple. He created him because he needed help to build Data and Lore. B4 was his assistant and could do all the like micro minutia crazy shit that Dr. Soon couldn't do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so B4 was designed by Dr. Soon to be his assistant. Well, Data's dominant subroutine takes over, realizes this, builds another body downloads his subroutine into that body, restores B4s, and Bob's your uncle, safe and sound. Data's Data's back.
Yeah,
Oh.
works. It works. It really does work. I still believe though that it would be disappointing to bring back data in any shape, way, or like use before fine. Use
Yeah, yeah,
before to create more some type androids that are not data. I think it's just disappointing to bring back
right.
data. He's had an amazing. I know that people didn't really like Nemesis and how it all
I
turned out,
love
but
Nemesis, but
I very much enjoy Nemesis. I think it's a different movie, but it works in a different way.
yeah, totally.
Um, um, I think it's just Data did what Data had to do in the series, and he will forever be iconic. And I think that even in his species, it would be nice to see something else
I think
if
I
there were to be a
think
species.
yeah, I think that's cool too. And if we never get any more data, I think data is such a wonderfully fleshed out, like we experience like enough data to like last us. Look, I mean, look at this crazy discussion we had just thinking
Hmm.
about data.
Have we not
So
had
yeah.
enough Spock? I mean, I love Spock, but no, I don't. I'm not a very big fan of
There's
Spock, but you get him in a
I
Kelvin
think
timeline, you
I
get him
think
in a
I
prime timeline, and he comes back to life, and
the thing
then now
about
you're talking about Burnham. Oh, forever
but
Spock.
the thing about those two characters, and for a moment now we're really going off the deep end here on our discussion, but I think
Oh
it's
wow,
still all
yeah.
really
It
valid.
relates to Data's day, so
It totally relates to day to day. The thing is that like I think what eventually happens though, and this is like just a fact of human nature, so to speak, is that like if we love a performer, just because like Star Trek has its universe and its canon, and there's important things not to go overboard. But when you love a character, you just want him, like the actor, to portray that character for as long as possible. And I think that's what uh, ends up happening with movies like this. And I think Star Trek does a beautiful job of like giving it their all. Because I want William Shatner. I don't care how they explain it. I want William Shatner back on the screen, and I think he should just be one more. Just I don't care if it's a
have
movie
you
where he's just by himself, like talking for 3 hours about Captain Kirk's life or whatever. I don't know,
have,
but
have you seen that interview? They ask him like, would you be willing to come back? And he says yes. And they're like, what about canon? And he goes, canon can be changed.
especially
Canon can be changed.
especially
You're
by
dead,
Captain
boy.
especially by Captain Kirk. I mean, Captain Kirk can do whatever he
God,
wants to,
man.
but the same goes for like all of them. For me, that's one of the things that's hard about Star Trek is that as much as I like us moving to new things, I think that
Have to let go.
I don't think the next generation's done in my mind. You know what I mean? Like I feel like there's still quite a few stories to tell
That
with
I
the
agree.
cast. And I think that there's still like
I agree.
some films, or maybe even something that no one's ever really done. But I wonder if these guys would be open to it as like a second run, maybe a half long each, of kind of taking us to their wherever they are in that point in their lives. So like age the characters the same way that the actors have aged,
Mm,
and just do like a high quality, like, amazing special effects, and give us like a primer for a new Star Trek universe uh beyond Next Generation. Wow, I hope this video gets seen by some executives over at Paramount. You're free to steal these ideas. I just want to see it up on the screen. I don't care if you
hey,
pay me or not.
transitioning from good ideas to bad ideas,
Yes.
because this is something that bugs me, and it's not necessarily in Data's Day, it's just in TNG in general. But I'm going to talk about it because it isn't Data's Day. They go find. So Data's trying to find a present for Keiko and O'Brien's wedding, and so he goes to this kind of replicator room where he finds Worf, and they're choosing the gift. Why the hell is there like a common replicator room? What's the point of that?
Those are the because like your replicator that you have in your quarters can replicate things that are about like yay big, like whatever fits in that little replicator
Oh, the
box.
cubicle essentially. It's like a
Um,
microwave sized
yeah, it's like a mic.
replicator.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, and so like that, the thing that kind of tipped me off was like, oh, like Worf was at first looking at a chair, so you could you could
Ah, I
you could
see.
go in there and like you could replicate a chair because like how do people get furniture
I see. So those are the
in
ones
their
on the
starship?
table, but they could be one like they could be a big
Yeah,
pad on the ground where you could actually
it could be a
replicate
pattern on
an entire
an
table.
entire chair. Yeah,
But
or
then
a
you have to
chair with
drag it through all of the
thing.
corridors back to your. No, you can transport it to your
No,
room.
you side to side
But
transport it to your.
just walking around the corridor with your big ass table, like. But okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, good. Well, thank you. You helped me
So
on that
yeah,
because every time I would look at it, and think, why are they
yay!
just replicating in these common rooms? This is pointless. But yeah,
Well, I'll to
I
be
always
fair, I
went
never
further.
even noticed them until
Oh, really? I
till
always
this
went like, is
episode.
it because energy distribution? I was thinking maybe it's like it takes too much energy to
Uh,
replicate that kind of stuff in a room. I was like, I don't know. Okay, well,
yeah, I think that's what it is. What's kind of interesting about the way the replicator works is that this is how I think maybe TNG's inspired gaming because you see like in some of these online gaming things like things just appear for you when you need them just like they do in Star Trek. So what I say is that like let's scientific community, let's stop wasting time on anything that doesn't matter and focus all our attention and energy on building a matter replicator. It's gonna totally change everyone's lives. um
Ted Sullivan tweeted, and I can't quote the exact tweet, so it was something along the lines of, "We don't like replicators," or he doesn't like replicators because he finds it's too easy in a story to have things like accessible that easily, and that kind of bugged me because they never use the replicators in a major way to kind of fix whatever story is going on. The replicator is there to not waste time on preparing a meal, not waste time on figuring out what kind of clothes. It's just like you replicate whatever clothes you need to go down on the planet, you replicate whatever meal because you're hungry, you replicate whatever weapon you need, and then you can move on to the actual story. And I always thought that replicators were a great idea in that sense.
oh yeah, it's a
Don't
great
waste time with
y-
small things,
yeah, but
especially on
even
a TV show. You don't have time to deal with trivial things. Just move on to. This is an episode about trivial things, but
right.
um,
But even on the show, there is that. It's interesting that Ted Sullivan tweeted that because even on the within the context of the show itself, as we'll see in the next episode, but we've seen many times already, is that there's a debate among humans about like should you replicate or should you cook, like the old-fashioned way and
mm,
stuff like that. And so, I think that's kind of an interesting thing that I'm definitely on the replicator team. I'm all for replicators.
why wouldn't you be?
Yeah, it's true. Like, come on, I'm ready. I'm ready for my replicator now. It can go in that corner right over there.
Oh, I can go anywhere.
And
Yeah. Anywhere you put it, I'll go to it.
computer.
Don't worry about it.
I'll have a vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
You put it at the end of the hallway. I'll go down there. Uh, yeah, no, it's good.
Very
I
interesting. Very interesting.
I've thought about that. I remember it. The third look that Data kind of gives, that really was human was in the barbers. So Geordie's getting his haircut. Sorry, not face, but he's getting his
But that's
haircut, and
great.
there's this alien woman, it
They're
would seem,
changing the
that's got
hair
this,
color.
yeah, she's got this green hair, and it goes from green to brown and then back to like orange because she's getting it kind of I don't know,
I think there's like
sci-fi
some
dyed,
sci-fi dye. It's like
and
we can make up
he
whatever for it. Yeah, it's like
yeah,
genetically
he has this double
engineered.
glance, a very comedic double glance. He kind of looks at it and goes, "What the hell?" And then he looks back at Geordie, and I thought that was very, very human,
It's true.
or not android at all.
I
Um,
think that I think if I'm not mistaken that the barber that's cutting Jordy's hair might be Mott, who comes in to show the many times. This might be his first appearance. That like interesting alien
oh, really? That
species
was his
with the
first
blue. Yeah,
appearance?
I think so. If I'm not mistaken, let me see.
The Bolian barber.
Bolian, thank you. Good on you for knowing that.
I don't know his name. I know his race. I know his species. So I mean
Later,
that's
he's not listed here on IMDb that I see.
mm.
But later on he becomes Mott, Barber Mott. Let me see what movie.
That Baba is, yeah, I suppose he's not recurring, but we do see him now and then. Um,
I think I think that he has even a rank. MOT, there he is.
it is nice to see a few of these kind of lower deck people
Moments.
constantly on the ship. It's
Hmm.
just nice to know that the ship, even though there's a lot of transfers and there's 1,000 people on the ship so moving around all the time. It's nice to see that there's a certain few that are always there and
This,
that have their jobs. And
it's true.
I
This
like that.
this particular Bolian's name is Vassal.
Okay.
So it's his first appearance on the show, but Mott comes later. And Mott will appear on Mott often gave tactical advice to Captain Picard, which is really funny. You go to your barber and you figure out how to solve the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Um,
when you're in a standoff with the Klingons or the Romulans, you got to go see your barber.
it's true.
I mean, that's
Um,
it. That's the solution.
speaking of DS9, I know this is just random, but today's actually the 25th anniversary. Is it the 20th or the 25th anniversary of
25th,
DS9?
25th.
25th anniversary of DS9. And so I'm obligé to say
Right.
that I do another show called Drunk Space Nine. Do you know about Drunk Space Nine?
I've heard about it. I
Okay, so
I'm intrigued by your
there's a
announcement. So go ahead.
yeah, I'm obligated to say that there's another show called Drunk Space Nine, which you can listen to online. You just do a Google search for Drunk Space Nine, and one of the feeds will come up. I think iTunes or Libsyn or whatever. And so it's the same idea as Starfleet Boy, except drunk. So
About Deep Space Nine.
and about Deep Space Nine. So yeah, go check it out. And Sean, I think I have to get approval from that is hosted by Goldus Scott, who's a friend of mine. But I'm sure you'd be welcome on
Okay.
the show if you wanted to ever get drunk and
Elder
talk
Scott.
about, talk about Deep Space Nine.
So it's
Yeah.
a
So
requirement. You need to get hammered. You need to get wasted to be able to talk about Deep Space Nine. Is that it?
yeah. Well, we came up with the show in a really weird way. I think this is gonna demonetize this video, but that's okay because that's not why I do this. But often, when I am watching Star Trek, I will have a beer or something like that. It's just it's a relaxing time, You gotta it's like that's the thing to do. And so one time, I forget, I had a few beers. It was like a weekend night, and my friend Scott just like that was the moment where he was like, "Oh, let's do are you?" He was excited about Starfleet Boy, and he said, "Let's do a show about Deep Space Nine." And I was like, "Let's do it right now."
Oh God.
And so that's how Drunk Space Nine
You
was born. It was
you
born
chose
through
the
drunk.
show very well, actually, because out of all of the Star Trek shows that exist, apart maybe for the animated series, which can get really funky sometimes, um, Deep Space Nine with the whole prophets and emissaries and all of that going on, yeah, sometimes I mean watching the pilot of Deep Space Nine drunk would be an interesting experience. It can't make it any worse, that's for sure. But
Oh wait,
ooh,
do we not like Deep Space Nine?
I don't like Deep Space Nine's pilot.
Interesting. I think it's awesome. I'd
Wow.
be curious for you to go back and listen to our drunk discussion of the pilot, and see what your thoughts are on that. But the reason I brought up Deep Space Nine is because to me it feels like with Keiko and Brian and O'Brien, especially, that like we're getting the first, and especially in the next episode. But around here we're getting like the hints of what is going to build into Deep Space Nine, because next episode we meet the Cardassians,
Mm.
which I'm excited to talk about next. But before we move on, do you think we kill it? Did we get everything we need to talk about on Data's Day?
We talked about nothing about Data's Day. We talked about everything else, didn't we?
No, we didn't. There's not much to talk about Data's Day.
There isn't much to talk about. Did, I don't know. What did I want?
I think this is
Okay,
the part in.
on a purely
Okay.
kind of formal kind of reviewing kind of way, I will say one thing is a bit weird. The whole episode is about Data and how Data is perceiving this day, and so we follow him instead of following the captain. And so we even get that situation where he's in the Picard's ready room with Ambassador T'Pel, and she gives a nasty glance at Picard, and so he excuses Data.
Mhm.
And so we, as we were talking about earlier, we follow Data back to his console, and he's saying, "Yeah, there's something weird about this whole situation." We have his point of view, except at one point, around like I think it's like the 2/3 of the episode or something, we get this whole situation where we're in the transporter room trying to figure out what actually happened to T'Pel, and we're looking at the debris, like the kind of remains, well, the planted remains of her. And if you go back and actually look at that moment, then it becomes, it's no longer Data's Day. It just becomes a run-of-the-mill TNG episode again, where you're following the captain and kind of the high-ranking officers, and they're trying to figure out what happens. And I just found it interesting that for that moment they
like deviated
went
from
away.
the thing.
Yeah,
But
because
Data
they didn't
was
necessarily need to do it. They could have just had another thing
right.
going on with Data, and then he goes to see Beverly Crusher and says,
Yeah.
"What's going on?" And she could have just explained, "Oh, we found the remains." But I think there was something with O'Brien in that scene where he had to explain that there's nothing wrong with the transporter, and Geordie too has to really go on and say there's nothing wrong with the transporter. It was just, it's kind of
But
just a moment that
Data wasn't in
takes you
that scene.
out
I
of.
don't remember,
He
right?
wasn't in that
Ah,
scene
okay.
at all, and he has actually nothing to do with that scene, and so it just uh, it takes me out of that whole Data's Day perspective.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
that
say this because I say that in Discovery they want to make a show about the first officer, and well, fail. It's not really the first officer, but most of Discovery does take place from like kind of the viewpoint of Lorca anyway, the captain. So I suppose they kind of failed, and it would be hypocritical of me to not say the same thing about this episode, where, but it is just this instance. The whole episode is Data's Day. It's just this moment isn't
yeah.
anymore. And I
That's
felt I don't know, is it just to move the plot along and talk about the transporter?
or fill
Um,
in an important piece of information that they felt that the audience needed, but it still would have been.
yeah,
It wouldn't. The I think the
would have
real
been hard
question
to
is
have Data in the room.
in the room just to like solve the problem. Yeah, that's true. But I'm not even sure that they were even trying to tell the story that way though, because there are a couple scenes, like for example, when T'Pel is trying to access the computer, she calls Data in, and we're already in her room in that scene,
Yeah, no,
and we actually
absolutely.
see her. And then there's a couple of other times where like they linger, like Data will leave the room, and then they linger just for a moment
Hmm.
longer
It's
in
just that
there. So,
all of those
but what
stories
I'm saying
really
is, I'm wondering
revolve
if,
around him.
yeah, I wonder
Whereas
if
this
just like
certain scene,
constructing it, like I wonder if that's something that was even debated in the writers, or not even the writers, but like among the production staff, and when the director was making those decisions. That's the thing about a show ultimately. And one thing that I agree with you about Discovery, like it could go hardcore, but the thing is, I don't know that like you can tell a story easily
yeah.
by just purely following one character. You know what I
Is
mean?
it
Like I don't know
interesting
that.
not knowing,
Yeah.
not having the point of view of the captain too?
Right.
Is
Right.
it
Exactly.
interesting? You don't know
Right.
what's
Yeah.
going on. Is
Like-
it annoying constantly being shrouded? You need to learn something at some point.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and maybe Discovery is realizing that it doesn't work and it's soft. I think that the interesting thing about Star Trek Discovery that we didn't have with any other show is that because of the way that like information is so marketing and information, the way it works today as opposed to when Star Trek: The Next Generation, when they were filming, like you heard nothing, no one cared. Very few fans cared about like what was going on, with the creation of the show. It just kind of
Mm,
like was like, oh, there's a new Star Trek show coming. That's so exciting. What's it about? Oh, it's gonna be 80 years. There's like limited information. Like it's set 80 years in the
mm,
future, brand new crew, blah blah blah. That's it. With Discovery, what I noticed was that like, and I don't know if this is just this whole phenomenon of where rumors become so like inflated that like it seems like there was so much information about the show from even like the politics involved with Brian Fuller leaving and all these things. So I feel like I did myself a disservice by kind of getting my hopes up that the show was going to be really radical, kind of like what was described in some of those like initial like press things that came out or whatever. And then which I bet like every other show it went through a journey where they were like, oh, this isn't gonna work, we have to change it, you know what I mean? Like they were
yeah, so
probably like
not
like
everyone always follows through on radical ideas. Mad Max Fury
ideas,
Road
yeah, exactly.
follow through on being.
Well, especially when your helmsman Brian Fuller, who was supposed to be the ship steerer of the radical idea, leaves. It's like maybe the new steers of the ship were just like, we're not Brian Fuller, we don't know how to execute this, like we're gonna do
Yeah,
it
no,
the way
yeah.
that we know how to. So I think Discovery, like, you could see that in the show, like you can see that it suffers from some kind of like failure on somewhere, on some level. And so, but the thing is despite that, I think that like and we're going to be talking a lot about this, uh so I'll end the discussion about it there. But despite that, I'm still curious about Star Trek Discovery. I'm excited about Sunday.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. But you're absolutely right. There is something going on there. But then to your point about this episode, it didn't bother me when I saw it. Like I didn't have the same kind of like thing, but now that I'm aware of it, I'm like, yeah, that's something that like
It
it would have been it would have been so simple to have data in the room. Like that's the kind of thing that like, you
to to be
know.
completely fair, that's not the kind of thing that you're gonna notice or pay attention to when you're just watching the episode to enjoy it.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
because we are reviewing these episodes or having discussions about
You
them,
have to, yeah, you have to go
we
deep.
have this kind of mind frame where I kind of analyze a little more.
Yeah, it's true.
To some certain extent, I mean, it might not be a good thing because analyzing episodes kind of makes you realize that some of your favorite episodes maybe aren't as good as you thought they were. I suppose it's just a different way of viewing them. But yeah, being in this
Well, you can't.
situation where I'm looking at every detail, I kind of noticed that. It's not a thing that
I
bothers me at all.
I like
It's
it though
something to point
because
out.
it's clear that you have an interest in filmmaking and writing, and and you can't help but see a show once you decide to take that journey into wanting to go behind the scenes and like start like, even if you are doing it, as a hobby, once you start making films and TV show, you start writing scripts and things like that, you can't help but like then go and say like, what, like there is a new layer to Star Trek for you in particular. And I'm there with you on the filmmaking side. Like I really enjoy, like, as a photographer, a very natural place I'd like to try at some point is like director of photography would be like an amazing thing to be on some kind of production. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like that would be like something for me. So I tend to like focus my attention on like that kind of stuff a lot too. So I love that, like hearing your perspective, because that's kind of a perspective that for me is rusty. Do you know? So I think you complete me. Anyways.
I'll finish on a good point actually, though.
Excellent.
Data has a kind of, I suppose, active friendship with Keiko,
Yeah, and this is actually her first episode
and
too. We
I
never see
was
Keiko before this, so it's kind of an interesting thing to
I was
drop
kind
on
of
us.
okay. So not only has he got this, I suppose, relationship going on with Doctor What's his face.
Dr.
Um,
Maddox, yeah.
I can't remember his name, but he's still in touch with him, but he's also got a real friendship going on with Keiko because I mean,
Yeah, she's like
look at
serious.
where he is
Right.
in the wedding and what he's doing, and
It's
yeah.
it's awesome from that you know, thanks for ending on that note because actually it's awesome from that perspective because even in his letter to Commander Maddox, um he says, "I'm going to give you, a rundown of a typical day in my life with a heavy emphasis on friendships." And
Mm,
he ends the episode by saying, although there are lots of he doesn't claim to feel human emotions, but he can understand some, and he's baffled by others. Well, Data, don't worry, humans are also baffled by
absolutely.
some emotions.
But
But he says the one emotion he does understand is love and friendship, and I think it's really great because it's a nice way to introduce Keiko because it's not a big deal that we never saw Data's friendships before because he's not one of the like prime characters, and in fact we don't see any of the crew's friendships outside of their own involvement with each other. So this is actually really awesome because you do see that one moment where Commander Riker seems to be flirting with the tactical officer,
yeah,
right? Like he's like totally
he's telling a
like
joke. He's
he's
telling a
telling
joke.
a joke, but then he comes down to the bridge and he kind of looks back at her and she smiles and like,
Uh,
and even
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
context of the
He was just
narration,
trying to see if his joke was funny. That's it.
right?
That's
And the
all.
narration in that scene was so it is delightful that we get to, obviously like we see that like of course these people just like right now, Sean, you and I are here doing the show, but behind us we have other people that you know
Mm.
around us that we don't I've yet to meet your wife, sir. And we're developing a friendship, but we also have other relationships in our periphery. So like I like that the show kind of expands on that. But Keiko even says in that one moment, she's like, "You're very important to both Miles and I because he brought them together." So, and he's
Mm.
given and for Keiko to choose him to be the one who gives her away, like he's basically
They are
representing.
very, very good
Yeah,
friends to be put
yeah,
in
they
the
have to be very
situation.
close.
It also
Yeah, so
helps
it's
the
a really neat
integration of
scene.
Keiko a lot because she
You can feel
immediately
the
feels
character
part of the
involvement.
family.
Exactly. Exactly. It was
She
really well done. Yeah.
immediately, it's not like, oh, she's just, the wife of O'Brien. No, she's Keiko and she's like an active member of this family that we're following on screen.
Yeah. It was a genius way of kind of doing that.
And it was
Um,
nice of them to not make an episode about like a Data's Day episode about friendship that revolves around Geordie. Because as much as I
right.
love Geordie, we know
He's not his only friend,
we
right?
know that Data and Geordie are friends. We know that they're best friends. But there you go.
No, no, very well said. So let's get to we could do quickly some of the little factoids on Memory Alpha because both Humbert and Gary present these, and I think it's interesting. So, did you know that the idea of because it might answer some of our own debates, we should read these
Oh no, no.
first.
We should. We should be organized is what we
We
should
should
be.
be organized on the. We'll read these first for the next episode, audience. The idea of doing a day in the life plot was first pitched by Harold Apter during the third season. Various viewpoints were considered, including Picard's and that of the ship itself. According to Ron Moore, Data's viewpoint was finally chosen because he's the only one who's up 24 hours a day, and that's so true. However, Michael
Mm.
Piller and Rick Berman instead insisted that at least one plot arc should run through the story, and the Romulan spy intrigue was created.
Okay, fair enough.
Interesting.
So that's how they
Cool.
got to the begin day watch and begin night watch.
Night Watch, which I loved.
I love that.
You get like such a cool glimpse into the workings of a starship, but casually, just like thrown in there as like a minor thing.
Yeah, that I mean,
It's
you don't have to
like-
make a thing about it. It's just that's how it
no,
is.
I love it. The writing staff had considered a shipboard marriage for some time before the development of this episode. Michael Piller had at one point suggested marrying Picard. That would have been very interesting. Another idea was
Oh,
to marry O'Brien to the female con officer intended to replace Wesley. Regarding the latter, Piller explained, I was against that because I felt that O'Brien was too good a character and potential benefit to the show to make him another star's supporting character. I felt he would always sort of be a sounding board for someone else to talk to, and I didn't want to waste him on that. So we never did get around to replacing Wesley, and O'Brien emerged on his own. That's cool.
Yeah, I
Gates
was gonna say
McFadden,
we never saw that replacement, that Weasley replacement. I was
yeah.
gonna.
Yeah, it's always like just the guest star, the guest of the day. I think that's an important thing because I don't know about you, but like that's something like you could kind of do contests with fans where you're like, hey, win a next ensign at the con. Like,
Yeah, well, you could do that, but I always thought it was amazing for aspiring actors,
it's
or
true to
you
get
know,
on the show.
I
It's a
mean,
great.
people
It's
that
true,
have done a few maybe ads, or that have done like really minor kind of just walking in the street kind of roles.
right?
Um, it
Well, we
to
get
have that.
like Ashley Judd on Star. Wasn't her first thing on Star Trek?
Um,
Do you know the
actually,
actress
Judd,
Ashley Judd?
who's that? I'll probably recognize it the moment I see her face. Right? Oh, okay,
And she was on Star Trek TNG.
really?
Yeah, she's in. Let's see, what episode was she in? It still hasn't come yet, I don't think. In the two, she played Ensign Robin Leffler in the two Star Trek: The Next Generation fifth season episodes Darmok and The Game.
Dominic and Jalad.
Yeah, it's gonna be an amazing discussion.
Um,
Anyway, such a good episode. Gates McFadden and Brent Spiner did their own dancing in this episode, except for one overhead shot where Spiner requested a double, as he did not feel confident enough to pull it off. McFadden did the choreography as she was a well-known Hollywood choreographer long before Next Generation. According to director Robert Weimer, McFadden and Spiner also developed the lines in the scene, which were later accepted by the scriptwriters.
oh,
Um,
really? It is
yeah,
one of
it's
the
kind of
scenes
cool.
that I like the least in the least in the episode. I say
Really,
this.
I loved it. I love that.
Now that I know that they write it, I kind of feel bad saying it. But no, it. I think it drags on just for a little too long. Which is kind of ironic to say considering he speeds the lessons up. I don't know. It's just not one of my favorite moments. Maybe because simply I'm not a fan of Crusher. I think that might be it.
Oh, okay. Well,
That might just boil down to that, you know.
that would do it though. Yeah, I guess I'd have to look at it again, but I mean the scene's definitely long, but I loved it. It was delightful for me. Gates McFadden, the actress who plays Dr. Crusher, is super active on Twitter. We definitely know about her cats and everything else. That's a really good impression of Data.
It finishes on a good note, though.
But she was but she was the choreographer for
That's amazing.
or she worked with Jim Henson. She used to work with Jim Henson like on Labyrinth and a bunch of other things like that. So she has quite a interesting pedigree.
Mm.
And I think if I'm not mistaken that she might be twins, but I could be mistaken about that.
Okay, so now you're just saying.
I think that might be Sohail's terrible memory or
Now
like
you're just saying whatever's going through your mind.
uh, Could you
This is
imagine though
amazing.
if she actually is twins? Second unit and insert shots for the episode were filmed on Friday, the 7th of December, 1990, on stage 8 and 9, including the scenes of William Glover. Okay, I don't know what that means. Anyways, there's a lot of content. There's a long list of continuity things, so I'm just gonna pick one at random here. Picard's action in this episode would be mentioned 10 episodes later in The Drumhead, twisted into near treason by witch hunting Admiral Nora Sati. Oh, that's a cool thing to look forward to. Vasal the Barber first appeared in this episode as his name was not stated in dialogue. The Star Trek Encyclopedia actually assumed that he and another Bolian barber featured in later episodes, Mr. Mott, were in fact the same person. That's what I assumed. so, so
I'm
it's an
gonna be
easy
honest.
assumption to make.
I
Yeah.
thought there was only one Bolian barber in TNG.
Which was Mr. Mott.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what
and I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that because I'm
what are
now.
the odds of maybe Booleans become barbers? Like, what are the odds of
I mean,
having
Picard
two
got used
Booleans?
to the Bolian barber, so when the first guy left, he needed to get a second one right. So, no.
Data mentions that this episode takes place during a celebration of the Hindu Festival of Lights, one of the few references to actual non-fiction religious religions in Star Trek. This would suggest, but not confirm, a date of October 24th, since the festival would fall on that date in 2367. Someone crazy did that math.
Wow.
Also, according to Data, the Enterprise was that crazy person's probably Larry Namasek, by the way, which a lot of these things come from his book, The Star Trek
Uh,
Companion. So, also according to Data, the Enterprise was commissioned exactly 1,550 days, about 4 years, 3 months prior. Oh, we get a point from which
oh my
they
God, we get
they
like
have
an actual date
a
for
date that you can then
March.
like figure out the continuity stuff. That's crazy. Taking the October date into account, this would suggest that the Enterprise was commissioned July 27th.
Yeah, there it
That we
is.
know the Enterprise's birthday, 2363.
Wow.
However, this is contradictory with the commissioning date of 4 October 2363 in the Star Trek: The Next Generation technical manual, which I have
Mm.
sitting here somewhere.
Well, I mean,
Ah,
but the technical manual isn't canon, is it? So.
I don't know, but it was written by the Okudas. If the wedding date is taken to be 1,550 days after the date of commission in the technical manual, then the wedding actually occurs January 1st, 2368, which would have been New Year's Day, not the Festival of Lights. So interesting. That
Well,
is
there
some
you go.
crazy. That is some crazy math. Well, I'm gonna go by. I like the idea of the Enterprise having a summer birthday. So mark. I'm marking the calendar now for July 27th, 2363. Because as we know, even whatever, no matter what the technical manual says, the actual on screen is the superior
Absolutely.
source of information.
All of the rest is a reference to canon. It is not canon.
Canon, exactly. This episode marks the first night watch scene on screen, although it does explain the difference in bridge lighting in several previous episodes.
Mm.
They were
So they had
having,
already thought about night watch and day watch before. They just had never mentioned it, which
they never
makes
mentioned
the
it.
whole thing better. Even it just makes
Yeah.
it deeper, doesn't it?
True. I actually like the way the bridge is lit too during night watch. I think it's very pleasant, and
Yeah.
that is something interesting. Before we go to our rating, if you're traveling on a ship for that long, you need something to kind of remind you when night and day is.
It must be very horrible. I envy
So,
Keiko's job. I'm not a nature guy. I don't tend to go out and walk in the parks or whatever. But if I was on a starship, I would want to work as Keiko's assistant. I'm terrible with plants. I end up killing them all. But I would like to learn and nurture plants and help them stay alive and grow.
start with here's a little tip. Start with succulents and cacti.
Yeah, well, I mean,
They're
as a
really
child,
hard
succulents were the thing that I could grow. I would just take one leaf from my grandmother's garden and
to.
plant it in my garden, and I'd have plenty. I'd be happy. But anything else? Yeah.
Well, that's a wrap. So let's get to the rating. Shall I go first, or would you like to go first?
Well, you can go first.
All
Tradition.
right. I give this episode just because for me it holds a very superseding anything about its plot. It just holds a very special place in my heart because I really enjoyed it when I was a kid, and
Mm.
it still delights me. I give this episode a 10.
Oh my God, a 10.
Yeah, a 10.
Spoiler
This one
alert!
gets a
I don't
10.
think any episode will ever get a 10.
I
Yeah,
know
I
you
can't do that.
established that. Yeah, it's true.
I can't do that. Oh, it's already canon, is it? Um, I think it's a 7, a good 7.
Yes. Okay, that's a good solid number.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
that
you,
was
you weren't
pretty.
you weren't expecting something terrible, were you?
No, no. So I guess we can average this episode out to an
8.5, I believe.
8.5.
Yeah.
8.5. Yeah. So there we go. An 8.5 for the two of us. Well, Sean, I will see you momentarily. But until then, and until next week for the audience, live long and prosper and see you next time.
Live long and prosper.